Hi everybody, Uncle Max here from the Life to the Max show. I'm here with a new friend of mine. I consider her a sister from another mister. Her name is Lisa, and when I found out what she does, I thought that's right down my alley. That's what I'm all about. And it's called ISR, and you can see that on the logo, and it stands for?
Infant Swimming Resource.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I thought it was infant self-rescue, but that works too, because that's what she teaches. She teaches children to stay alive and be able to solve a problem and become big people, to make it to becoming big people, because there's a lot of people that don't. We were just talking in an earlier segment about the fact that my wife has a cousin that died from a drowning accident. Your husband?
My husband's best friend died from drowning. My son-in-law has a friend who died from drowning.
Yeah, and I was just mentioning, there's this new station that I was introduced to, and I decided to follow it because I think they do a really good job, and they have better energy than most news stations do. But they showed this one guy, and I'll put a link to it if I can. The big, tough, muscular dude, muscle bound. Everyone thinks he's tough and macho and strong, and he swam a little distance, got exhausted pretty fast because he probably played football, where the average play is 6 seconds. They're good for little spurts.
Yeah.
Versus wrestling, which we did. We expend more in a 60-minute wrestling match than an entire football game, because you're constantly exercising those muscles, and that's what he was doing. He was swimming, got exhausted, and he panicked, and he didn't learn how to float into self-rescue or whatever,
right.
And he sank and never came back up until he recovered his body. So I just think this is fantastic what you do. What inspired you to learn about this? Well, first of all, tell us what it is all about and what it entails.
So ISR instructors teach infants and toddlers how to self-rescue in the water. So infants from the ages of 6 to 12 months who can sit independently are trained how to roll onto their back and float should they fall into the water by themselves. And then babies or toddlers who are 13 months and older and are walking can be trained to swim in addition to the self-rescue skill. And we teach them a sequence that we call swim, float, swim. So they're trained to swim for about 3 to 4 seconds, roll to their back, rest, breathe, and then flip back over and continue swimming. And then in the end, they can continue this sequence all across the pool. It gives them that opportunity to, if they were to be caught in the water away from the edge or the stairs and then needed that breath, they know how to roll onto their back, float, rest, breathe.
Yeah, you were telling me that there's a famous guy that was here in the Olympics, here in the Intermountain West. He and his wife had a child, and they thought their pool was safe, but they weren't at their pool.
You know, you've probably heard of Bodie and Morgan Miller.
Yeah, he's a downhill skier.
He was an Olympic skier, and I believe his wife was an Olympic volleyball player, but they lost their daughter.
Yeah.
When she was 2 years old, and they attribute a lot of that, and we talk a lot to our parents about water safety and the dangers of flotation devices like puddle jumpers that train your child to be in a horizontal posture, in a vertical posture, which is considered or called a drowning posture. A small child cannot tread water effectively, and they will sink if they're in that posture.
And so will big football players.
And that's what those flotation devices do. They also give a child a false sense of security. When parents use those devices, they're teaching their child how to have fun in the water. And their focus is on having fun before providing them the skills.
Yeah.
So they're trained that I can jump in the water, I can float, and I can have fun. And they don't understand that that is coming from a device that's wrapped around them and not their own buoyancy. So it's our responsibility really as parents to teach our kids and our little ones especially to respect the water and that it is a dangerous place.
Yeah. Well, it's just like anything else. It's just like your drain cleaner, your bleach, your knives in the kitchen, a firearm for home protection. All of these are powerful tools and have some inherent danger to them just like a car. We teach emergency safety about cars, but we don't do it with water. And so, in essence, we love our kids and we think we're doing great for them, but we're really, out of ignorance, setting them up for danger and for failure.
Correct.
And everyone thinks, well, that'll never happen, but only the people that it never happens to say that until it happens, and then they realize, oh, it does happen.
It does, and it only takes one time for that to happen.
Yeah.
So when I hear parents say, well, my child can't open the door by themselves, or my child can't get out there by themselves, or my child can't get through the gate or through whatever barriers they have set up, I will tell you, they couldn't until they could.
Yeah. Oh, I actually have a safety video because I'm a big safety guy, and anytime I see something that can educate us, it was all about 4 barriers between your little one and the pool, because before you know it, they will have somehow mastered the dexterity skills, whatever, to master 3 of them, and that 4th one may be the one last thing that kept them from going in. But even if you have all 4 of them, somehow they have the skills, they mastered them without you realizing it, and they did get in the water. They haven't been taught properly how to deal with water, and
not only have they not been taught properly, that they, in most cases, they've been taught that the water is a fun place.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't they go into what they're drawn to the water?
Yeah. It's like people playing around with firearms without learning proper firearms handling skills and safety and everything. And then I think one of the universities here in the West, there was a recent accidental shooting death of one of their star football players. And I'm willing to bet he did not learn proper firearms handling skills. We have to learn these things, and this is so good. What inspired, well, first of all, there's some statistics that I was hoping you could rattle off for us of how many kids this happens to, or even adults that this happens to.
Well, I can tell you that according to the CDC, drowning is still the #1 cause of accidental death in kids ages 1 to 4. So more than car accidents, more than any other type of unintentional death is drowning.
Yeah.
And when people ask about their child crying in swim lessons or ISR lessons, yes, crying does happen. Most kids stop crying by the 2nd week. The crying comes from the fact that I'm a new person, they don't know me. They're in a new environment, a pool that they don't know, and they don't really know what we're doing. So it's the discomfort of being there with somebody that they don't know is generally what the crying is attributed to. But I mean, I will tell you, for me, when I put my daughter in ISR lessons when she was 2, she cried. And
it can tug on a mom's heartstrings.
Sure. I always tell my parents it's harder on mom and dad than it is on anybody. Yeah. And
but it's important to still push through that.
And we have a saying that ISR is not for every parent, but it is for every child.
I love it. Because that's so important. There's so many parents now that are just rescuing their kids from any kind of challenge or difficulty, that their kids are growing up extremely fragile, and we've seen a lot of that with people just falling apart, with maybe even somebody saying something that they disagree with, and they completely fall apart and melt.
Well, and my child, when she was little, she would cry the same every time I put her in her car seat. She did not like being restrained in her car seat. But it didn't mean that I was going to let her out, because I knew that device was going to save her life should an accident occur.
Yeah.
And sometimes that meant her screaming through an entire road trip.
But they adapt. They acclimate to that new circumstances. A lot of people that survive major disasters, they eventually adapt and overcome. In the military, we always talk about adapt and overcome. And if we practice those skills now with our little ones, they will start developing this as a way of life, and they'll grow up more resilient and capable. And you mentioned the words problem solving. Now, expand upon that, because that was really good.
So we are not only training the child to swim and self-rescue, but we're training them to become an aquatic problem solver. Mm-hmm. So we're putting them in scenarios and helping them through scenarios where they have to think about, where do I go next and what do I do next? But the action or the skill of being able to roll on their back and float and rest and breathe gives them that time and that ability to think about, where am I going? Where do I need to get to safety? Or what do I need to do to get to safety? And even infants that are just being taught the survival skill to roll on the back and float until help arrives, they don't have the developmental capability of swimming yet, but they actually learn how much air they need to keep in their lungs to stay afloat, so that they can still cry out for help, but still remain floating.
And that gives them that safety buffer, because if without this training, they would go in, they would accidentally fall in some neighbor's pool or even their own for, I was an EMT years ago. I'm getting recertified. My wife says I'm certifiable all the time, but I'm not quite certified to get licensed again, because medical training is continually improving, and I want to stay up on the latest and greatest. But when I was working as an EMT years ago, I worked the grave shift, and I was relieving the swing shift at a security EMT position. And he was in the middle of a divorce because his wife went to answer the phone with the baby in the bathtub. I mean, you hear those words and you cringe, because you know what happens, and most of the marriages don't survive when something like that happens to them.
Correct.
Now, just so you know, and I won't share it now, I'm not quite sure when I'm ready to share it, but I lost a child to a non-patent airway situation. It would have been the equivalent to a drowning. And she lasted about 4 days in intensive care, and it's not as bad as you would think. When I share that story, you'll find out. It wasn't good, but it was about as least bad as it could have been for us. But it still wasn't fun, and I don't want anyone to go through that. So when we were doing our CPR training in this most recent course, I piped up at the beginning of the class. I let people know I lost a kid. You don't want it to happen to you. Pay very close attention to these skills, because they say 70% of the time you need to do this is with somebody in your family or friends.
It's true, I've heard that as well.
So besides learning ISR, which I thought was Infant Self-Rescue, it stands for, once again,
Infant Swimming Resource.
Infant Swimming Resources. I want you to learn it. I want you to check it out. And if you love your kids and you want them to be prepared for life, have them do this. And then I want you guys to learn your CPR. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in our first aid training and the additional training that you can get.
And that is what we teach, what we want to really emphasize to our families. It's not just about teaching your child these skills and you're good to go. We want parents to understand that it's important to have all barriers when it comes to access to water.
Oh, so we're going to employ a lot of those 3 or 4 barriers, and then we're also going to teach them what to do if, in fact, maybe you could walk us through the different steps, because we just got some footage of kids that were kind of brand new, that are still 1, just learning the basics. And then we got, once they've mastered some of those basic skills and learning how to roll over, then what do they do if they're in their summer clothes and they're by a stream or a pond and they slip off the wet moss and they fall in and nobody noticed it for a few minutes, Well,
86% of kids who drown are fully clothed.
See, that's, who knows that unless you're in this arena? And it's a statistic that's for reals out there, but we don't know it because it's never happened to us. It's kind of like, well, it was a near miss, and you think it doesn't happen at all when it's happening all around you. It's like when you ask a police department or a highway patrol, where are the crimes in my neighborhood, or where are the accidents on the freeway? And you see a freeway and everything's running smooth, you think that's the way it is. But if they were to put on the map how many accidents, it would dot the entire freeway. On the neighborhood, you would have maybe a break-in, a burglary, or whatever all around you, but because it doesn't happen to you, you think, oh, well, that's not for real, that doesn't happen, that's not the way it is. When in reality, that statistic.
Well, and it happens all of the time to parents who don't think their child is at risk because they say, I don't have a pool in my backyard. My neighbors don't have pools, my family doesn't have pools.
Oh, because I don't have a pool, I don't need it. But
many of these drownings happen on vacation. Think about the last time you took a vacation that didn't involve some sort of water around you. And you're not always as...
I mean, it could be a hot tub, for heaven's sake.
A lot of times it does happen in a hot tub. A lot of times you're in a place that's unfamiliar, so you're not familiar with the security measures in place, or you may not be familiar with surrounding bodies of water, such as ponds or reservoirs or rivers running through properties. And
a lot of infant drownings, well, that's a story. It's just like when they're little babies, they could literally drown in just a couple inches of water, which is what happened. But
yes.
But if it was a stream or a pond, it doesn't even have to be that deep. But if they learn these skills, they'll learn how to stay alive until you find them.
Right.
And you're going to think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened. But everything's fine, and it might just be a footnote story 20 years from now that you might mention, oh yeah, well you actually almost drowned when you were little. I did. Instead of so-and-so drowned 20 years ago and you don't have your uncle because he drowned, you know.
Pretty high percentage, around 80% of kids who drowned were seen less than 5 minutes from being found in the water. So a lot of times you'll hear parents will say, they were just right here. They were just here a minute. I just saw them. But it can happen so quickly. Oh,
I was just amazed at when I was capturing some segments, and we'll show you some great segments, even from that little 1-year-old learning how to roll over to these kids that are in their summer clothes and in their winter clothes.
Winter clothes.
Because you could go out in the fall and it might be cold and there might be a little bit of ice and seconds it takes for them to walk out on what they think is solid ground. They fall on the ice or an edge or break through. They will have the skills to know what to do. But yeah, it was fascinating watching because I kept thinking, why are they stopping so soon? But that was a 10-minute session, kind of, wasn't it?
Correct. So our lessons are 5 days a week for a maximum of 10 minutes for each session. This honors the attention span of the child. These are small kids and their physical capabilities, as well as our program is based on behavioral psychology, sensory motor learning, and we don't ever want to work a child to the point of exhaustion, to either temperature fatigue or physical fatigue.
Or even emotional. It's like, oh man, this is such a drudgery thing. You don't want them to think this is so drudgerous. I was just amazed at the smile of a little 1-year-old who rolled over and it was in the water and he came up, and if he didn't have that training, he would be panicked and probably never want to swim for a long time.
Well, and he cried his whole first week.
Yeah.
But that's because he was uncertain about what was happening. Now he loves it. We have another saying that competence breeds confidence.
Yes.
So now that he's feeling confident in the water and he's feeling confident, he loves it. He loves to swim. Yeah.
The fact that, well, first of all, I'm a guy, and experts tell women, treat a man like a puppy dog. Just give real simple instructions and lots of reinforcement. And I got ADD on top of that, as you probably noticed from my segments, but that's a good way to do it. Short training sessions with multiple repetition. I call it, when I don't remember something the first or second or third time, I'll say, that crossed my neurons once, but it didn't stick, But you need a few more repetitions before it really sticks and become a permanent skill, or a permanent, like learning a person's name or something like that. And that's what this does, is it's short things for little minds or guys that also struggle with ADD. And then that repetition, and it's so important to reinforce these things.
Well, you want to give them the opportunities to succeed.
Yeah.
And if you work a child to the point of exhaustion, nobody performs well when they're exhausted.
Yeah.
So
physically or emotionally drudgery. I'm not a big drudgery fan. And you got to stop while they still want to.
So you give them that opportunity to feel that success, and they will continue to grow.
Yeah. I just noticed nothing but positive reinforcement, and you did mention we don't want to reinforce that activity, so let's not do that. And you talked to some parents about, be real consistent about consequences, good and not good, for the good and not so good behaviors, so that we can reinforce the good stuff and get those kids to really learn those skills. And that's very important. Parents need to know that they need to require hard things of their kids, and then their kids grow up knowing, hey, I can do hard things.
It's very true.
There's a show that I just caught on cable. It's called Survivalists, and it's about families that are kind of city slicker folks, you know, and they get a chance to go out here in the Intermountain West, and they have family against family competing for some of these experiences where they might need to jump off a rock into the water or climb up this little rock. Everything's done very, very safely. And you see these kids have never done anything before, and they come out having accomplished something that was challenging and difficult. They just come out with this sense of confidence. It's like, oh yeah, I can do this, but I can do a whole bunch of other things too.
Yeah, and they're really proud of themselves.
Oh, absolutely. So you say the sessions are 10 minutes each for 5 days, but that's over a 6-week period.
5 to 7 is pretty normal.
That's kind of the range, yeah.
And 6 weeks is about the average.
Okay.
But everything is tailored to each individual child.
Individual.
And every child is unique.
Yeah.
So you may have an older child that finishes in 3 weeks, or you may have somebody who is maybe experienced something like a near drowning or an accident, and you've got to take things a lot slower, and they may take 8 weeks. Everything is going to be tailored to your individual child.
In the Army, we call it crawl, walk, run. I was using the analogy earlier when I was capturing some of these great segments. You got to teach them basic math before you can then build on those foundational things.
Right.
And what kind of steps? You kind of start them out, like even putting their face in water is traumatic for somebody who's never done it.
Well, our very first priority is breath control. So the very first thing we teach is breath control. And depending on the child, it may start as simple as just pouring water over their face and getting them used to water in their face.
Yeah.
And working up to putting their face in the water. And then working up to opening their eyes under the water. I mean, it may be a week before you really start introducing anything beyond that, just depending on the child.
Yeah.
And then we move on to their body posture. They can't swim if they're kids who have been in flotation have that sensory motor, that muscle memory of being vertical in the water. And now we've got to work on getting them horizontal.
Got to rewire their brains in a way. Getting their face wet, and then you actually can like drag. Well, we saw some great segments of that.
Well, ISR has been around since 1966.
Oh,
so,
really?
Yeah. Our instructors are trained. We go through a pretty rigid 8-week training course where we're trained in anatomy, behavioral psychology, physiology, in addition to hands-on training with the kids. There's a lot of academic training involved as well. So
you were gone a good amount. You left your family to go clear across to the east coast.
To go to Florida. So
it was a big sacrifice to learn these skills. Now, what inspired you to get into this?
Well, I guess the first time I ever saw ISR was when my sister-in-law put my niece and nephew through the program, and I went to one of their lessons.
Is that the first time you even heard about it?
I'd never even heard about it.
So you were like me before we became introduced.
And I just thought, and at the time, my youngest was an infant. She was just a tiny baby at the time, too young, and I thought it was amazing. I was a swimmer growing up. I swam competitively in high school, and I saw it, and I was just amazed at what my niece and nephew were able to do. My niece at the time was, I think, only about a year old, and so she was pretty young for learning the swim, float, swim. And I couldn't wait to enroll my daughter, and then we ended up moving into a house with a pool. And once she was crawling, I was just a nervous wreck about it. I knew I needed to.
Because you knew better. Yes. An average parent wouldn't even have thought about it, but because you knew the dangers. And I have 3 older daughters who I didn't know anything about ISR when they were young. Yeah. So my youngest is a very precocious little girl. She's one of those
escape artist.
She can get into anything.
She can get into anything. She can get out of anything. She's the first child that we had to put locks on upper cabinets.
Her middle name was Houdini. No.
She was a climber, and she was very resourceful. She would find anything and everything to climb.
Yeah.
And even with a pool fence, I had a lot of concerns because I had older kids, teenagers, who were not always conscientious about locking the pool gate.
Yeah, typical teenagers, distracted.
We had, even our pool guy had left the gate unlocked a couple of times.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
She had things out in the yard, toys and slides and play equipment, things that I knew that if anybody could find a way over that fence or through that fence, she would do it.
She would do it. And so you took action rather than just ignore that little shoulder angel saying, hey, you gotta give this training, you gotta do this training. And instead of ignoring that, you took action, your Jiminy Cricket, you listened to him and you got him enrolled and
yeah, so before I was ever an instructor, I was an ISR mom, and she did not make it easy on her instructor. She was a challenging one. But, and there were moments where I thought, my child's gonna fail this class. But it takes a lot of patience, and it's all about working on
perseverance on mom's part. Because you have to stick it through, even though this is very difficult emotionally.
Yes.
I mean, you have to do the right thing.
And her instructor, being able to read her and her personality and working on those very small approximations of the behavior that he was looking for, and little by little she got there.
Yeah, it reminds me when I was, we were mobilized after 9/11 for a Homeland Defense mission, but I still took it extremely seriously because, you know, the facility I was guarding, if some antagonistic got even close to what we were guarding and put up a sign and took a picture and put it on the internet, it could have destroyed the entire nation's confidence in our ability to even keep ourselves safe within our own borders. So I took that job very seriously, but some of the troops were just, it's a job, instead of really having it in them to do what they needed to do. And I had to require of them to do the right things, and maybe they didn't like me so much for doing it, but I kept them all safe, and I made sure that they all were able to go home. And even safety things like, not just safety from somebody attacking, but safety because you're using proper safety protocols to, you know, seatbelts and ways to stay awake and alert and alive. And you just have to do the right thing. You can't cave just because it's hard or it's not popular at the time. And later on, a lot of these guys come back and they show a lot of respect for me coming back because I required of them to do the right thing and just, you know, stick through it. And even though it wasn't popular for me, but do any of them remember that first week? I don't remember that little kid with a smile on his face thinking about that. He seemed pretty happy.
No, and my daughter's 4 years old. She's an excellent swimmer.
Yeah, it's just so impressive. I'm so proud of you for taking action, which is really hard for a lot of people. And in my show, and some of my segments are like the naughty corner. I teach knots, and knots scared a lot of people. So I say, all right, we're going to start out with the most basic knot, and you have a whole week to practice it. And then the next week, we're going to teach you a knot that's a little bit bigger, and we're just going to baby step through these knots. But by the time you're through with 1 year of the naughty corner, you're going to be a knot ninja, and you're going to know how to do it very quickly and very fast, and blow everyone away. It's like, whoa, how'd you do that? How did you know how to do that? It's because I just baby stepped into it, and that's literally what you're doing with these babies. You're baby stepping.
Exactly.
Oh, the other thing I wanted to ask about is sometimes we skip steps. There's neurological specialists say that if a kid learns to walk before they really got a good crawl pattern down, it affects their brain development. They need a heterolateral gait to properly connect both hemispheres of the brain, and then if they don't, sometimes they have learning problems. They literally have to take these people back and teach them how to crawl before they walk. And so sometimes people learn how to swim before they learn the foundations. And those are the adults that think, oh, I don't need to learn these float swim or swim float swim techniques.
Yeah.
And so they think well, I know how to swim, but then all of a sudden they're caught in a situation. But you were mentioning that that if we don't have a foundation and they skipped it by not learning this important step, that this is a skill that we need as a 1+1 for everybody, not just infants, but all the way to adults, because those adults that drown.
That's true, because they haven't had that, they get into a situation where they panic and they don't know what to do. But if it's built into your muscle memory and you know that I can roll onto my back and float and rest and breathe, kind of gather my thoughts and figure out where to go from here.
Yeah. That panic, it's called one psychiatrist once that it was a great book I listened to, was Just Listen, the ability to get to absolutely anyone. He talks about that when people are under a lot of stress, they have what they call an amygdala hijack. Amygdala is something that can help you in an emergency in some ways, but it can also hurt you. It's like the fight, flight, or freeze thing, where if you need to go out and battle, you just focus on one thing and it increases your heart rate and your breathing and your glycogen so that you can actually do battle with whatever it is you need to fight. But sometimes it's that panic and the deer in the headlights, that freeze, and that's what you're helping them to avoid having that switch. Right. So that amygdala doesn't get hijacked. You give them that skill so they can stop. Okay, I can get some breaths. I'm not exhausting myself by panicking and then doing this and then sinking. Instead, okay, I can take a breather. I can turn around and swim a little bit. I can take a breather. Now, how am I going to solve this problem?
Right.
And now that they have it. So, boy, this is just really good training all around. But I just want to thank you for being willing to share this, and for moms and dads that allowed their little kids to demonstrate these skills. And I'm just so impressed when you told me that they actually get in summer clothes and then they go in winter clothes. I thought, that's exactly right. When do they need it is when they're at a park or at a stream by the picnic and they get too close to the water, or somebody just wasn't paying attention. You know, you watch your little brother and then they get distracted because they had their phone or something. And you know, you're saving two people. You're saving the little one who could have drowned and the teenager who would have been scarred for life because they felt guilty for the rest of their existence. And I know some people that were there when one of their siblings had an accident and just messes up their psyche, and we don't want that to happen. So awesome. Any last things you want to share with us on that?
Just if you're looking for any more information on ISR, our website, the website is infantswim.com. And you can find a lot of water safety tips. Our mission is not one more child drowns, and it's about not only training these kids, but educating parents on water safety. And there's an instructor locator on the website. You can plug in your zip code and find an instructor near you. Oh,
fantastic. We'll definitely put a link to that on our website, to theirs. And I was just thinking, you know, there's some crazy legislation trying to you know, I'm a self-defense and Second Amendment guy, and they're trying to pass this law to protect kids, they said. But we looked on the chart of how dangerous and how often this happens, and it was number 50 out of 50. You're more likely to have your kid die in a combine accident on a farm than to die from this, from some firearm thing they said they were doing because of safety. And we says, well, how about we make laws on the first 49 to keep them safe? And then they backed off because they realized that it wasn't for their safety. They were just kind of doing it for whatever. But I'm thinking, why don't they make a law that if kids are going to swim in any kind of public pool, that maybe the parents have a 5-minute video just to introduce them to what the risks are, and encourage every parent to find an ISR instructor and perhaps take that training. And maybe that would be something that would save a heck of a lot more kids.
The American Academy of Pediatrics, in hopes that we can have that incorporated into your well visits and have that discussion, have pediatricians have that discussion about water safety.
I mean, even if they had just a little pad or a computer and they could literally say, hey, I just want to come over this or go over this with you. Let's just watch this. And that way, parents that were not in the know, like you and I were, me until recently, you until you saw was it your niece? Is that what it was?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden, you became aware and, you know, well, I was ignorant before, now I know the bigger picture. That's the whole goal of my show, is to introduce people to things that they were completely unaware of, but once they find out about these things, it's like, oh wow, there's so much more to life and about other things. I definitely want to know about it. And when you know about it, you're empowered, and you know what to look out for, where an average ignorant person is going to be putting their kids in danger. Like every time I go to a store and I see little kids standing in a shopping cart, and I mentioned, you know, I'm an EMT, and kids are top heavy and they go splat, and I don't know that you want to change your diaper for the rest of your life because of brain damage. You know, you might want to have your kids sit down in that cart. And a lot of them think, oh yeah, they didn't think about that, and they have their kids sit down in there forever. And so, and this way, we want our kids to be safe. And so, I think I mention it to everybody that comes to swim my pool, that they need to look into this.
One last thing that I'll mention too is to be sure that you are working with a certified ISR instructor. There are a lot of copycat programs out there, and instructors who might claim to be ISR certified. You can easily verify that certification on our website. We have very strict and lengthy safety protocols. ISR is nationally recognized for our safety protocols. So it is important to be sure that you are working with an actual certified instructor who has gone through the proper training.
That's so true. I looked into doing some therapy dog training with my last dog. And everyone thinks, well, what kind of training do you need? And there's a saying, you don't know what you don't know.
Correct.
And once I went through some of this training, it was like, whoa, oh my gosh, there's so much more to this that I didn't know. And so don't let that be an excuse. Oh, that's fine, we're fine. You don't realize that there's a lot more to it. And, you know, unless you go away for 6 weeks of training, they will point out a lot of statistics and techniques. And you might see something, a technique demonstrated here, but you don't realize that there's about 20 or 30 other things that she's learned beyond that technique, what to do in all kinds of situations. So don't just take this and think you know anything about it. Go to a legitimate person that really knows the training, that's certified, and it's not cheap. And you know me, I'm not cheap. I'm thrifty, frugal, and downright cheap. But if you had a kid drown and you said, well, if you pay me the equivalent of the price of this course and you can have your kid back, you'd say, oh my heck, I would do that in a heartbeat. I'd bark from whoever I had to be able to get my kid back if I just had it. But just realize that you kind of need to do it in the beginning. And it's worth the investment to know that your kids are going to be safe.
And there are scholarships available. We work with multiple drowning prevention foundations that provide either full or partial scholarships based on financial needs. So don't ever let finances be a barrier to providing the skill for your child.
And we talk about that in our Thrifty Treasure segments. We show that you can get prepared for life and for emergencies. There are a lot of ways of doing it. There's really expensive ways to do it, and there's less expensive ways of doing it. But we just now know that if you're in a really tight spot, don't let that be the reason why you don't. And if you go out to eat at restaurants, okay, so you had, you had your restaurant meal, and then what do you have to show for it? In this case, you've got skill that will be with them for a lifetime. I like things that last. Yeah,
the total cost of the program is usually less than the cost of a new cell phone. So next time you're thinking about upgrading your cell phone.
Oh, I can upgrade this phone, but I can't save my child's life by teaching them how to be safe around water.
That's true.
That's a really good point. Yeah. do it. Thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing
you're
that
welcome.
with you. If we weren't in a standoff, I'd give you a little side hug, but we'll do elbows from afar here. Oh, there we go. And thank you for introducing this to a lot of people. And let's go out and be safe and be prepared for this aspect of life. Anyhow, till next time, Max out.
All right, you're welcome.